Nissan engines hold the mark, both the 3.56-cylinder engine of the legendary VQ series and its younger brother VQ25 with a volume of 2.5 Li. They account for 22% and 68% of the cars offered for sale, respectively, easily take the bar of 300 to 350,000 kilometers of run. And in addition to low-quality fuel, because of which oxygen sensors instantly fly out, motors are only afraid of overheating. If you notice that in traffic jams or after turning on the air conditioner, the arrow of the temperature gauge crawled up, do not delay cleaning the clogged radiator cells. For this procedure it will have to be removed. As a rule, this should be done every 40 to 60,000 kilometers. And if the arrow starts to dance on a warm engine and it blows cold from the stove, first of all check if the radiator has leaked at the junction with the plastic tank. And in any case, it's better to go straight to the service. The risk of overheating with air locks in the cooling system is high, and subsequent head repairs for $2,000. The inline 4 of the QR25 series with a volume of 2.5 liters, for 10% of cars, which complements the quite reliable all-wheel drive borrowed from the Nissan X-Trail crossover with a multi-plate clutch for connecting the rear axle, is weaker than the 6s, not only in terms of power. The culprit of unstable operation, along with the throttle assembly requiring periodic cleaning, is the timing chain stretching after 150,000 kilometers. In a particularly neglected case, due to the departure of the phases, the motor may simply not start, while for both V6 the chain serves at least 200 to 250,000 kilometers. Jatco JF011 EV belt variators on Teanas with both 2.5 engines, with proper handling, can last up to 200,000 kilometers. Inherited from the predecessor Jatco RE0F06A, the problem of overheating and failure of the stepper motor, while the variator freezes at one speed, mostly concerns early copies. But after 100 to 120,000 kilometers, due to the hum during movement, it may be necessary to replace the bearings of the drive and driven shafts. Yes, in cases of replacing a belt with the same mileage are not uncommon. The variator does not favor active driving and does not like a sudden stop of the wheels, for example, when hooked after slipping or when stuck into a curb when parking. A rotated belt leaves scratches on the pulleys, and they, in turn, begin to gnaw the belt, first of all erasing a thin notch of the working surface, and the variator begins to slip during acceleration. The risk of slippage is lower for restyled cars younger than 2010 with a modified CVT control program, and it makes sense for owners of earlier versions to reflash the brains of the transmission to install updated software. The variator does not favor constant pushing in traffic jams. The lower the speed, the longer the unit's operation time with the maximum gear ratio and the steeper the belt bend on the drive pulley. And the faster the belt ages, and wear products can clog the pump valve and lead to failure due to oil starvation. In order not to bring to a premature repair costing $2,000 to $2,500, having barely felt the jolts in the operation of the variator, do not be stingy to upgrade the expensive Nissan CVT fluid and S2 branded transmission along with the filter. A more torquey version of the Jatco JF010E CVT with a 3.5 engine further respects a relaxed driving style. Less pressure on the half of the pulleys in it is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the risk of a belt break is lower, but on the other, the chances of slipping and wear of the pulleys increase. And after 150 to 170,000 kilometers, in any case, it is better to change the belt preventively, without waiting for the metal tapes in it to suddenly burst. Be careful. After 100,000 kilometers, the power steering, GUR, is just as lightning capable of failing. In order not to get into a delicate situation with the steering wheel suddenly filled with lead, do not be lazy to inspect the high-pressure hose. It is laid near the red-hot exhaust manifold, which is why it is aging intensively. And keep an eye on the level of the working fluid, even if it just leaks slightly through a small crack in the hose. The power steering pump that does not tolerate air in the system may be covered. And the gentle pump can also be sentenced by too active taxiing in cold weather with unheated oil and car washing. The fact is that the reservoir with the working fluid is located at the edge of the right wing, and when washing under pressure, moisture and dirt enter the reservoir through a leaky cover, due to which the pump valve jams. For lovers of cleanliness, it makes sense to attend to the installation of an O-ring under the cover, added to the design in mid-2013. There is no need to expect such harsh surprises from other elements of the chassis. The steering rack can tap for years without failure, and the first, after 40 to 50,000 kilometers, are the bushings of the anti-roll bars. After 50 to 70,000 kilometers, the stabilizer struts and tie rod ends begin to tap, and more noticeable infusions are usually required after 80 to 100,000 kilometers. Shock absorbers, bearings assembled with the hub and strut bearings may be needed. And the most tenacious are silent blocks of the rear suspension along with levers and ball bearings assembled with front levers, which can withstand 180 to 200,000 kilometers each. But the modifications of the Japanese assembly until 2009 inclusive are weak with rear springs. After 3 or 4 years, the already modest ground clearance is blown away to such an extent that not only the exhaust system muffler, but also the tail lights can be damaged. How? A long rear overhang catches the edge of a large pit or a particularly prominent cop during a drawdown. The bumper rises and breaks off the corners of the lamps. New optics will cost $160 for each element. With the St. Petersburg Teens, such an incident happens less often. Longer springs raise the front end by 1 centimeter, and the stern by 2. And with the body of Teana, you won't get bored anyway. For example, in winter, even with a slight frost, you can simply not open the door. The heat-loving lock jams. Therefore, in the fall, the tea growers, taught by bitter experience, along with the seasonal change of tires, clean and cover the door mechanisms with frost-resistant grease. And the spring drops in the cabin can happen not only because of the hatch drainage clogged with dirt, due to a miscalculation in thermal insulation during temperature changes, condensate accumulates on the inside of the roof panel, spoiling the ceiling upholstery with stains. But the main body trouble is different. The paintwork is delicate, like a sakura petal, and the metal in the places of chips quickly rusts. Does not add gloss and chrome finishes, easily scratched over the door handles and blooming on decorative elements, especially on Japanese assembled cars. For Russians, the coating is different, a little more resistant. But even without external influences, in just a year or two, the hood, trunk and window frames can become covered with ulcers of swollen paint. Therefore, the thickness gauge rarely reveals the accident past. Body parts, most often hoods, of many cars were repainted under warranty, often more than once. Because of this, at the end of 2011, at the plant in St. Petersburg, they even began to paste over the front of the hood with a protective film.